Welcome to NMS. I want to discuss today protein intake because obviously this is a hotly debated topic and a lot of people will say, oh, look, you don't need that much protein. And there are studies out there that have actually shown that somewhere between 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram is actually beneficial. And a little bit more protein, obviously, if you're an athlete that needs to cut weight, but you want to maintain muscle mass while you're doing your cut. Now, what I found interesting was that the Helms et al. Study, which is study number 2 on my list of 3 studies that I found, basically suggests 2.3 to 3.1 grams per kilogram of fat-free mass when dieting to preserve lean muscle mass. Now, obviously, if you've got an athlete who has large amounts of muscle mass, is training quite intensely, and doesn't have a lot of body fat, and at the same time maybe actually doing some sort of cutting type diet in order to lose body fat, those athletes are going to need a lot more protein, okay? Now, I know that many years ago, especially back in the 90s, bodybuilders were really pushing the idea of having about 3 to even up to 4 grams per kilogram of protein a day. 4 grams is probably excessive, but pushing the idea of 3 grams per kilogram a day is actually not excessive when you're talking about an athlete who's cutting or an athlete who's trying to build muscle and has large amounts of muscle but very low body fat levels, okay? Now, obviously, if you're looking at an athlete that plays a sport that doesn't require large amounts of muscle mass and is more of a sort of maybe a sport that requires more endurance, you probably don't need as much protein to maintain muscle mass. But if you're looking at a sport like bodybuilding, or you're looking at a sport like powerlifting, or even a lot of sprint sports where they do a lot of weight training and strength work and power work specifically, your protein needs definitely do go up. So I'd be pushing more towards the Helms study of 2.3 to 3.1, or the Morton study, which actually says more advanced athletes trying to maximize hypertrophy should be eating more protein. So what is the true answer? The true answer is probably, if you're an advanced athlete pushing hypertrophy, you're pushing towards 3 grams per kilogram per day. That's certainly a suggestion I make, and a lot of people will argue that that's too much. The fact is that I would prefer to have too much protein than not enough protein, because I want to maximize my protein intake. And I also want to maximize my protein intake and try to minimize the excess calories I need in order to put on muscle mass. Okay? So let's do a summary on this, and I'll give you my ideas and what I do with athletes that I work with. So in summary, if you're just a person that goes to the gym on maybe 3 or 4 times a week, and you're just trying to lose a little bit of body fat, maintain good health, you can get away with 1.6 grams per kilogram. If you're a more advanced person who's doing more weight training per week, maybe 4 or 5 times a week, and you're looking to build a little bit of muscle mass, then 2.2 grams per kilogram per week. If you're quite an advanced athlete and you're training quite intensely and you've got a low body fat level and large amounts of muscle mass, you're probably looking at least 3 grams per kilogram per day in order to maintain anabolism and in order to maintain a good level of protein to induce more hypertrophy. So I'd be looking at more the Helms one, where obviously I treat someone as being close to fat-free mass and push their protein levels up to around 3 grams per kilogram per day, okay, which is quite a lot of protein. And if you've got a person that's 80 kilograms, you're probably looking at somewhere around, up to 240 grams per kilogram, 240 grams of protein per day, So it's quite important that, you do get a high level of protein and maximize that, and then try not to go too much into a calorie surplus. So at the same time, you can minimize the amount of actual fat that you gain in order to gain that muscle. Okay, so it's not the traditional bulking, it's a higher protein diet with a slight excess of calories. So I'm going to talk more about the calories side of things and the carbohydrates sort of things in another video. But that's my summary of what protein intake should be, somewhere around 1.6 for a beginner level who's doing a little bit of weight training, up to 3 grams or more for an advanced athlete who's trying to maximize hypertrophy at a low body fat level. Thanks for listening, guys. If you got any comments, by all means, leave them in the comments below. This video will be only on YouTube, but I might do summaries of this video on other platforms. Thanks for listening, guys, and have a good day.